Om Shanti. Ours is a life of change, and Madhaban means constant changes of program. I think tonight the plan was that we would have World Meditation Hour and Daddy Gozar would come. But unfortunately I don't think Daddy will be joining us, so I was asked to share a few thoughts. And then at 6:30 I think Daddy Janki will come and lead meditation, and she will give a short class at 7:30. So that's the latest program, but it might change again. Tomorrow night, Baba will be coming. And I think just being here, seeing everyone arrive, you can feel the atmosphere building. I think all of us can feel the wonderful anticipation that Baba will be with us tomorrow night. And I have two feelings about this. Firstly, that I wonder what Baba will talk about, because I always love the first Muli of the season, because it's like a report card of how we've been going during the year. But also Baba's observations of the children, our stage, and the state of the world. But at the same time, I feel before Baba comes, many times I reflect, well, what did Baba tell me last season? And did I do what he asked us to do? And for me, last season, there's a few words that just constantly come out. If anyone says to me, what have you been thinking about? What have you been practicing? One of the words which comes to my mind was suddenly. You know, so many times Baba said during the season that children, things will happen suddenly. And when I left Madhaban at the beginning of this year, around February, I had in my mind that there would be many situations in the world. Suddenly things would happen, and that is true. Even over the last few weeks, we've all been observing this sudden world financial crisis. But actually, as the year went on, I began to think differently about the word suddenly. Because talking to Brahmins, I began to feel that it's a time where suddenly things emerge in me. You know? Suddenly a sanskara, an old sanskara emerges. Suddenly a strong feeling, a strong emotion emerges. Suddenly something happens in myself that I wasn't expecting. And I've been traveling quite nicely, and I'm completely thrown off course. It's like an upheaval comes within. And I have a feeling that as time moves forward, it's like the momentum of settlement is increasing. Suddenly things are happening inside all of us. Sometimes it's suddenly a relationship which was going well, suddenly it changes the dynamic of that relationship. And it made me begin to think that one of the great skills of this life, if I can say it, is the ability to manage this process of change. All of us have taken on this huge commitment to transform myself. But actually, as we travel the path, so many things begin to happen. And so many things emerge within myself. And it's like a wisdom to know how to manage that change. Because sometimes we become shocked. You know, we're almost shocked at myself. I become afraid almost of what emerges within myself. And as a result, I can overreact to certain things which emerge within myself. And I begin to think, this isn't working. Maybe I need to do things very differently. But actually, I think when we have the wisdom of managing change, we begin to understand that things will happen as I move forward. I don't need to overreact. I don't need to worry. I don't need to be afraid. In fact, it's all a part of this extraordinary process which I'm in of self-transformation. Because ours is a life of change. And I think personally that nothing makes us happier, nothing makes a Brahman happier than when we transform ourselves, when I change. I think that is the happiest moment of this Brahman life. And I feel that many BKs that I've spoken to feel that a lot has changed. I'm absolutely dedicated to this life. I study, I remember Baba, I do service, I cooperate. And yet still many of us feel that some deep things still haven't changed within myself. There's some deep things which are there. And this is why one of the other words of last season for me was the power of determination. How many times did Baba mention, children, have courage? You know, have the power of determination to bring that level of change in yourself. Because this is really the beauty of this life and the happiness of this life, when I bring that deep sense of self-transformation. And one thing I loved that Baba said last season, he said, children, sanskaras are strong. It's like Baba acknowledged the strength of some things in the soul. But Baba said there's one law that makes it happen or makes change possible. And that is that if we have one step of courage, Baba will give 1,000 steps of help. Do you remember Baba saying that? It's like all my responsibility is to have the step of courage, the determination to bring change, and then Baba's role is to support that change in me. And Baba also said that actually the children do have the courage. The children do take the steps of courage, but at the same time, we also have some waste. And so on the one hand, we have the courage, but on the other hand, Baba was using, telling us what we say. And sometimes we say, Baba, I'll definitely do it. I have to do it. Now is the time to do it. But. Do you remember? The buts and the buts. And then Baba went into the fact that we offer a lot of reasons and excuses as to why it's not possible really to bring this level of change. And during the year, I began to observe myself, in a sense, when I have a determined thought. Because sometimes as we travel along, there's a situation, there's a realization, a deep realization of my own weakness. And there's such a determined thought is there that I want to change this. But there's always challenges to the power of determination. And I remember once Baba explained there's a very subtle law of karma that works. And this subtle law of karma says that the moment you have a realization, that's when you have maximum power to change. You know, the instant you realize something, at that moment you have maximum power to bring transformation in the self. The longer I leave it, the weaker the power of transformation and determination. So it's like as soon as I have the realization, I need to act at that time. But what I began to notice is that the first challenge to a determined thought is obviously the 5 vices. You know, when I have a determined thought to bring change, the vices will challenge me. I want to change my anger. There's definitely irritation or anger will come to challenge me. It's a definite thing that my determined thought will be challenged. But the second level of challenge I found was like my own reaction to the vices. Sometimes I think when we observe myself being angry or whatever, I react to myself. Maybe I feel guilty. Maybe there's an attraction to someone or something, and my reaction is guilt or shame. What would others think if they know that I'm going through something like this? or even lack of self-respect. And so I have my determined thought, and there's layers of challenges, and even finally sometimes when I see that I'm influenced by the vices, my own reactions, what happens is that I begin to feel a little bit hopeless. And so that determined thought is diluted and diluted until it becomes even a little bit of hopelessness or disheartenment. And then this self-sabotage comes in. You know, I knew I wasn't strong enough to do it. And so sometimes this process happens. And I often love it when I hear in the Sakamuli one thing that Baba often mentions. Baba often says, children, storms will come. I've never heard Baba say, children, storms might come. Has anyone ever heard Baba say that? And even Brahma Baba shares his experience. And sometimes it's not even storms, it's typhoons and earthquakes, huge things happen. But actually, it's all a part of the process. My feeling is as we develop wisdom about how to manage this life, we don't overreact. We understand that on the journey, upheaval will happen internally. It is a part of the process. I don't need to overreact. I don't need to worry. I need to keep going. And even when we listen to all the stories of bhakti, you know, where did actually Krishna fight his battle? He was on the battlefield. You know, we know the story of Ulysses. He had to face so many tests. It's like a Western mythology, and they're all symbolic of facing the upheaval within. And even the modern word which we hear today is jihad. You know, jihad is often interpreted as fighting the non-believer, but as far as I understood, the original idea of this word was the battle within, dealing with the things which emerge within me. And I feel that I've learned many things traveling this Brahman life. There's so much to learn, and actually wisdom or experience is the great teacher. And as we become experienced, we learn to manage this extraordinary, wonderful life of transformation. And I feel when we take spiritual birth, you know, we're just a baby. And as a small baby, we're innocent and we're born into this beautiful life. I remember when I started, it was like coming home. This is where I belong. I belong to Baba. I belong to this family. And you know, I started in 1975. And when I started, there was a picture that said destruction would happen in 1976. And I don't think Baba said that, but someone had printed this picture, and it was a sort of a thought in the Brahmin family that maybe this would happen. And I can remember thinking, well, I've got 10 months to become pure and perfect, no problem, you know. And so many years later, here I am still on the journey. You know, we start in a very innocent way. The days of childhood are very sweet. But I think the level of transformation is quite superficial. The first level of change is just habits. Habits are things that the soul acquires in this lifetime. Habits are based on family and culture and religion and these sorts of things. And so habits are things like food, sleeping habits, language and so on. And quickly habits change and we begin to get the confidence that I can really begin to transform quickly. But as I begin to travel the path, what I've seen create some discontentment in some of Baba's children is that each day we listen to Baba, and Baba says, children, ultimately the aim of this life is to become pure, is to become perfect, is to become a totally clean soul. And that is what I'm traveling towards, and I need patience to travel towards that journey. It will take time. But sometimes I just begin to live on the surface. I just become an image. So on the surface, I live the image of perfection, but internally there's upheaval which is happening. To me, this is the bhakti sanskara. I look good on the surface. I say the right things. I look the part. I wear the badge. But internally still, the upheaval is happening. It's a natural thing. And one thing that really helped me was when I feel that Baba gives us this beautiful aim. I should never leave the aim of purity and perfection. But I need to understand that I'm in a process of transformation. I've left the shore, but I haven't reached the destination. I've got to be understanding that I'm in a process of change. And I think when I actually have that self-respect to accept where I am now, rather than always putting myself under the pressure of being perfect now. So at the same time, the wisdom that I need to learn to manage this life is keep the highest aim, but accept where I am at this minute. To me, that has helped me a lot. And in a sense, it takes a lot of pressure off myself. Because, sometimes we try to live up to this image, and internally, I feel something very different. In time, I think who I am inside and who I am outside comes like this, but it needs a lot of patience. Secondly, I think what I've learned traveling this journey is this lesson of self-acceptance. It's a huge lesson. Because in the same way, Baba every day is saying to us, reminding us of our highest religion of purity. I feel when I began, I not only fell in love with Baba, but I fell in love with the concept of purity, because it's my truth. It's our truth. We love it. And yet, when impurity emerges in me, what do I do to myself? Sometimes I react and I reject myself. Sometimes it's like this internal force which rejects who I really am. It's like a violence against myself. And to me, nothing makes me weaker. It's not what Baba wants me to do. It's my old sanskara. It is my bhakti sanskara. I want to be pure. Baba tells me to be pure. Impurity arises, and then my ego pushes away myself. And to me, nothing makes me weaker internally than when I begin to do this. And I feel that we've got to learn the art of accepting this change. Impurity will arise, but my lesson was the less I react, the quicker it goes. The more I react, actually, the force of the impurity begins to stay with me. It's like, rather than reacting, I begin to observe that these things come, and actually the less I react, the less force this really has. And I feel it really helps me, because my thinking over the last 6 or 8 months, from Baba's last 2 years, he said something which really touched me, and it's been one of my main forms of thinking along this line. That Baba said, children, for self-progress, I need to let go the eye of arrogance and the eye of disheartenment and emerge the eye of soul consciousness. And when I heard that, it just made so much sense to me about what is happening in this journey of self-change. Because I began to think, which has the greatest influence? Does the eye of soul consciousness, the original eye, have the greatest influence? Or how much does the eye of disheartenment or lack of self-respect influence, or the eye of arrogance influence? And in a way, it's almost like I've got 3 personalities sitting inside my head. The eye of arrogance, the eye of disheartenment, and the original eye. And in a sense, they're all competing for control. Each one has their own influence. And as I began to think about it, to me, the eye of arrogance is the eye of superiority. And this is the I which thinks, I am better, I know more, my understanding is the right understanding. But how do I know I'm under the influence of this I? When it filters into my feelings, because feelings are the real indicator of my spirituality and my stage. And to me, whenever I feel hurt, whenever I feel disrespected, whenever I feel insulted, whenever I feel not valued, know the I of arrogance is ruling inside my head. It's not the I of soul consciousness. And this I is a very powerful I. And this is the one that we've actually, sustained for a long time. But actually it's just a cover for the real I of impurity. And that's what Baba described as the I of disheartenment, which perhaps we could say is the I of inferiority, the I of lack of self-respect, the I that thinks that others are better than me, others know more than me, others understand better than I do, others don't like me, others don't want me, others don't accept me. All that thinking. And when that trickles into my feelings, that's when I really know I'm under this I of disheartenment. I start to feel a bit unworthy, inadequate, inferior. These sort of feelings are in the soul. And sometimes I think this I of inferiority, the I of disheartenment, the I of lack of self-respect, has been etched in the soul for such a long time. And this is like a filter through which I see my life. I think I see reality, but actually I'm looking through the filter sometimes of the I of arrogance, and that distorts what is really happening, or mostly through the I of lack of self-respect, and it distorts my whole picture of life. Someone speaks to me normally and I think they're being rude, because my lack of self-respect interprets it in that way. And this is why Baba said to let go that I of arrogance, to let go that I of lack of self-respect, and emerge the original I, the soul-conscious I. And I really feel that sometimes we spend so much time trying to create self-respect and deal with my ego. But actually, Baba's method was the more we emerge the true I, the original I, the I of soul consciousness, automatically the effect of these I's diminishes. Because when we're under the influence of these, we swing. My stage goes up, my stage goes down. I go up and down. But actually, as I begin to emerge what I call the middle path, the I of soul consciousness, I think this is like coming home to where I belong. I honestly believe that the reason why we often feel that fluctuation in Brahman life, even after many years, is a lack of practice of the first lesson. The way I listen to the Sakamuli, I just feel that Brahma Baba gave us an indication of where he put his attention. And there's never been a Sakamuli I've ever heard that he hasn't emphasized the practice of soul consciousness. I personally feel that many of Baba's children feel that I've invested so much effort in soul consciousness but not much result. There's not as much, shall I say, fruit of the investment put in. The reason is I practice to be a soul, I practice to be a point of light, I practice these things, but I haven't changed the image of the self. I still identify with the I of arrogance and the I of lack of self-respect. And that's why sometimes it seems so hard to really develop a stable sense of self-respect. Because many times I feel, the I of arrogance and the I of lack of self-respect aren't lovable. I try to love them, they're not lovable. Only the I, the eternal soul, the original self, am really lovable. And so sometimes I think one of my learnings recently has really been to invest more in the middle path, the eye of soul consciousness, and then these fluctuations, I think, really begin to change. But even as we continue on the journey, I think another learning for me is that sometimes when we stabilize myself in Brahman life and I begin to travel quite happily, I love Baba, but I begin to think, what is my part? What is my role? Where do I belong? Sometimes we feel that someone's going to come along and just hand me a role to play. But I don't think Brahman life is really like that. And I think many BKs a little bit, they love Baba, feel content in my relationship with Baba, but not so content in what I'm doing for Baba, my part within the Brahman family. And one of the things I've reflected on a lot is that for so long I've defined myself on what I do rather than who I am. It's such a deep sanskar. Everyone in the world today, in a way, body consciousness is defining myself by my activity and, as we know, all the things we do in life. That's my definition of who I am. And actually, a relief, when we become Baba's child, we begin to let that go. But I personally believe we subtly rebuild it within Brahman life. Within the service field, I rebuild this subtle ego structure of defining myself on what I do rather than who I am, or my spiritual stage. So I begin to do service. And I feel that as soon as I say, Baba Haji, I'll start your service, different sets of sanskaras begin to emerge in the soul. Sanskars that have been dormant, they haven't been emerged, because as soon as I take responsibility, responsibility is connected with many sanskaras that I've collected along the way. Possessiveness, controlling nature, territorial, this is my responsibility, you have your responsibility, comparison, competition, criticism, you know? And it's almost like when I step onto the service field, these sanskaras begin to re-emerge in the soul in subtle ways. And the way I feel about it now, it's not wrong at all, because in a way they have to. I remember someone once told me that Baba said that he could tell the quality of a child when he gave them responsibility, because as soon as you become responsible, things will emerge in me, and then sometimes in the Brahman family there will be opposition or challenges or difficulties too. And then Baba could tell the quality of the soul and how we dealt with these things. And I feel that when a part of our change, an essential part of our self-transformation, is to live in the heart of the Brahman family. I feel it's crucial, because the way I see relationships these days is relationships are an indicator of my spirituality. They're a wonderful, shall I say, mirror for me to know where I'm at, because relationships with the family reveal to me who I am. Because other souls touch things within me. When I come in front of them, they touch things and feelings emerge within me. The Agyani soul will immediately project onto you. The Gyani soul realizes that this is my feeling and begins to realize that the relationships in the Brahman family are the best way of learning about who I am. Some complain a lot about the Brahman family, that this happens and that happens, and distance themselves. I feel they've lost an incredible opportunity to learn about themselves and, in a sense, understand my own ego, because it's just this lifetime of learning about my ego. And It's others that press these buttons and reveal to me who I am. In a way, they're my teacher helping me learn about myself. And if we take it in this way, I think this is a wonderful way of moving forward, that the Brahman family is a real indicator for me to learn about myself and learn about my own sanskaras, and then bring a lot of change within me. And another thing that I've learned as I've moved along is to accept my own capacity, my own ability in a sense, and not compare with others. And you know, one of the things which really helped me was, if I can say, I think when I began, I thought I had to try and do everything, you know? I had to be good at all sorts of things, teaching, you know, yoga, all aspects of service. And perhaps there's some who are all-rounders, but one thing that really helped me was to learn and accept what I did well, and learn and accept actually what I don't do so well. Because that's also a liberation, and I think a part of really learning about myself. I know this year when they had the European Teachers Retreat, the whole theme was realization and reality. That a knowledgeful soul has a realistic view of my strengths and weaknesses. I don't feel, shall I say, arrogant about them, but I don't feel bad about them too. But I have the ability of self-assessment. I'm not in denial about my weaknesses, and I'm not over-exaggerating them too. And I found that when I began to realize that I can do some things okay, but some things I'm not so good at, but it doesn't matter. Others are good at that in the Brahman family. It was like a little bit of a liberation for me. And so as we travel, as we learn, as we become experienced, I think we become wise how to manage this extraordinary life of self-transformation. But still, I think sometimes I feel, you know, we grow up, we go from the baby, we start to do service, but sometimes, and not always, we can have a spiritual midlife crisis. You know, it's what they say in the Lokik world, but spiritually. And what happens is that, and I've talked to many BKs, that, you know, we travel for some years, and suddenly something comes up within me that I thought I'd changed years ago. Has that ever happened to you? You know, you thought something had transformed, and it comes back with force. I remember one of our older sisters even saying that 6 years after Gyan, a lot of irritation came in her. And she said, I wasn't even an angry person before Gyan. And so we need a lot of wisdom, don't we? Because sometimes I think Brahmins start to feel that this isn't working. It's not really working, this process of change. And I begin to doubt myself because of the force of things that come up. And yet that's why I feel it's really important to understand that sometimes these things do emerge. Baba wants me to keep going. No matter what, keep determined, no matter what comes in front. Because I personally believe that the bhakti sanskara is sometimes when we first come to Baba, our bhakti sanskara is to suppress things rather than transform things. So sometimes we push things down, and for some years I move along, but in time it can re-emerge once again. Maybe not as strong, but it re-emerges, and that's when I begin to doubt and say, am I really progressing? And even sometimes some even think, am I really Baba's child? Because these things are very deceptive. And that's where I think to observe how I react to my own deep sanskars, and as Baba said, have that determination to keep going. Because sometimes I think we can suppress things. Sometimes I think we deny these things to myself too. You know, because we have these inbuilt mechanisms of self-deception that I don't want to see the reality, and so I pretend to myself that this isn't really happening. There's all sorts of reactions. Sometimes I even avoid situations that emerge deep sanskaras. I think I've changed, but actually I live within my comfort zones. You know how sometimes we can create a life where I live within my comfort zones and actually don't step out into places which maybe emerge the depth of my sanskaras. Whatever it is, the power of these sanskaras can be very strong, and yet I feel Baba's message of last season was children identify them and have deep determination, and even I feel make a plan of change. Because I've done this a few times in my BK life, because sometimes I think our approach is quite innocent. We think if I just keep going on and on and on, one day I'll wake up and all my old sanskaras will just fly out the window, I'll be an enlightened soul. And maybe that does happen. But actually I think we need to make a plan of action. Identify what is the sanskara that really is stopping me really moving forward in this life, and make a plan of self-transformation in front of Baba. And what I've done a few times, I remember some years ago I began to realize how the sanskara of lack of self-respect influences everything. And I began to observe in my life what triggered these feelings. Because sometimes it's a personality, sometimes a situation triggers these feelings within me. And I just bow down and say, take me over, feelings take me over. But what I began to do is try to respond in a different way, with gyan rather than emotion. Often we study, we teach others, but as soon as a strong feeling comes inside, I just bow down and let the emotion take over and all the negative thoughts, rather than at that time really applying a different way of thinking. And what I noticed is that if you remain determined, and in that situation or in front of that personality that sometimes brings up something within me, if I apply a different way of thinking or responding, at first is just a little bit of success. Maybe 1% success, 3% success, 5% success. But I chip away at the sanskara and I start to see transformation beginning to happen in some of these deeply etched sanskaras inside the soul. And I think that, this was probably the most powerful message Baba gave us last season. Children, I think he said, we are Brahmins, we love Baba, we follow this life, but the world will change when our sanskars change. And he gave us so much encouragement to bring that determination, deep determination, to bring transformation in myself. So I really wonder what Baba is going to say tomorrow night. I have a feeling he'll pick up on what he told us last season, as he usually does, but something new will obviously emerge too. Anyway, I think it's time that I finished, because we're going to have World Meditation Hour, and I think Daddy will then join us. So, thanks, Om Shanti.